Good morning, all you do-it-yourselfers out there. Today we're going to be repairing a 12 gauge electric cord, an extension cord. You may have some similar problems with yours. This particular cord I'm going to work on today is a 100-footer. It's very expensive. 15, 20 years ago it didn't cost me that much, but today it's over $100 to replace this cord. This is one that had a three receptacle end on it, and you can see one of the receptacles has had a problem. Now, I don't know how dangerous that is, but anyhow, the other end of it, the plug end, is missing the ground probe. So we'll be replacing both this end and the other end. I've got another wire I'm going to replace today. And can you see how that got burnt? It almost looked like somebody threw acid on it. But I don't know what caused that. It may have been moisture seeping into that plug, because this particular wire goes down to where my irrigation reservoir is, where I do all my lawn sprinkling. So this has been exposed to a lot of water over the years. And at any rate, I'm going to show you what I think is the best way to replace both the receptacle as well as the plug end of a heavy-duty extension cord. The most common choices are these plugs that you can buy at a big box store or from Amazon. They have two straight probes as well as a ground probe. These are made for, the current we have here in America, 120. The problem with them is that when you go to close them back up, there's really not enough room in there to get a good seal on the covering of a 12 gauge or a 10 gauge extension cord. These things might work okay for an appliance. Say you've got an iron or something like that. Maybe an electric wood splitter where the cord has gone bad, or some sort of power tool, a buzz saw or something like that. Even if you take that little adapter out of the middle, that hole does look big enough to accommodate this wire, but it doesn't give you a waterproof seal. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do today. Instead of replacing these receptacles, I just bought another extension cord, a short one. This is 6 foot. You can actually buy a 3-foot extension cord. This is 12/3. What this means is that it's 12 gauge and it's three wires in it. The 3 wires would consist of a copper wire encased in green. That is your ground wire. You have a white wire. That's your neutral. And then you have a black coated wire. This is your hot wire. This is where the power flows into the plug. And I will be using these, I don't know what you call them. If I say these butt plugs, that doesn't quite sound kosher. But these connectors, these butt connectors, one end would slide onto the plug end of the wire that you're going to use for replacement, and the other end of the butt connector would be pressed onto a similar wire in the extension cord itself. This will make sense when you see me do it. Heat shrink butt connectors, and it's AWG 12 to 10. So 12 gauge or 10 gauge. It's a tube shrink. Get them from Amazon. Just look up heat shrink butt connectors. I've struggled with these repairs for years. Some YouTubers claim that using these butt connectors are dangerous because they're not strong enough to hold, both ends of your repair together. I think they probably are going to hold just as good as something like this, where you can't hardly get it clamped down, and where the wire screws into the actual connection on these probes is probably not much stronger than this that you're going to crimp. Plus, when we finish the repair, I'll show you how we're going to make sure that it's as strong as can be, probably almost as strong as brand new. Here are some of the tools that you might need to do this little job. It's not rocket science, but looking at this, you might think it's brain surgery. You would probably not need all these tools. I got a set of wire cutters here. This will be to cut this really thick extension cord. You don't want it cut raggedy. You want it to be a pretty clean cut. If you don't have any wire cutters and you don't feel like buying a pair, they're not expensive at all. I guess you could lay your extension cord across the stump and take your axe, give it a good whack, and get a clean cut that way. I'm going to use a magic marker or a pen to mark around the extension cord where I'm going to make a cut. I'll probably be using some sort of blade, a sharp knife, or something like that, a box cutter to cut the insulation off the extension cord. These are wire strippers. Once we get the cover cut off the extension cord where we're going to make the repair, we will be stripping the insulation off of each individual wire. The black one, the white one, and the green one that I showed you earlier. These are crimpers. You could probably just use a pair of pliers to crimp. I got some needle nose pliers to help me pull things around if I need to, or to hold something. This is good for holding, vice grips, and side cutters. Don't try to cut your big wire with these little tiny side cutters. You just be chewing. But once you get inside that extension cord, this very easily cuts the 10 or 12 gauge wires. Okay, this looks complicated. When you see me do the repair, you'll probably be able to get by with what you have in your junk drawer or out in your shop. Let's start by cutting off the damaged receptacle. Okay, that's pretty darn clean. Guess it's time to get started on the repair. Now these tools do have wire cutters in them. But you can't get a big extension cord into that slot. That's not going to work. These may be able to get this insulation off, but you could also use a box cutter. But we want this cut around this insulation to be symmetrical all the way around it. So we're going to clamp it off and make a mark. I've clamped off this cord with a small pair of vice grips, and then I can take a gel pen or a magic marker, something that would write on these old dirty extension cords. And I'm just going to scribe a mark all the way around it to help guide me when it comes time to use a blade to cut this insulation off. It just makes for a neater job. Now, let me get one of these butt connectors here. All we're going to need is probably 3/4 of an inch of that wire in there. But this stuff is stiff and it's hard to work with, so give yourself, an inch and a half of leeway in there. Cut the insulation off that much. We can always tape these wires back up after the repair is done. But if you cut it too short, you'll be struggling to move those wires around to get them into the butt connectors. We've got our line on there. You can remove the vice grips if you want to, but sometimes I just leave it on there so I can keep my blade right up against it. You can see that this yellow insulation is not that thick, so when you go to cut this, you don't want to go in too deep. And then after you make that cut, let's make a longitudinal cut lengthwise across the cord. You can also do both sides. Again, we're not going too deep with this. Now we should be able to get our fingernails in here and just peel this off. And then once we get it down like that, we take a pair of scissors or a knife or something, and you don't want to leave this all jaggedy. Okay. So we've pretty much got the outer insulation off. We can pull these apart a little bit to help us make it easier to connect these butt plugs. The next step is going to be to remove the insulation off each of the individual wires. And for this, we will probably be able to just go ahead and use our wire strippers. Again, a cheap tool. Electrical wires come in a variety of sizes, just sort of like shotguns. The lower the gauge, the bigger the boom. So 12 gauge is a pretty hefty wire. 10 gauge is a little thicker. If you're going a long distance, you're going to, run in something like a pump, log splitter. If you're going 100 feet, 150, 200 feet, you're really going to need something thick like that. Otherwise, a small cord is just going to get hot and melt. This tool is also graduated. There's two types of wires. One of them is stranded and the other is solid. Most of the wires in the extension cords that we buy for residential use are stranded wires. In other words, once I pull this insulation off the individual strand, you'll be able to see it's just loose copper wires in there. So your tool will have a stripper hole for stranded or solid. So we're going to go down here to where it says 10 gauge or 12 gauge. This is 12 gauge wire, but I'll probably make my first cut on the 10 gauge just to see how that goes. I don't want to cut in too deep on that and risk pulling those strands apart. Let's give her a try. Stripping this wire is probably going to be the most difficult part of the whole operation. I wish I could afford to go get a better pair of wire strippers. They have some that would clamp right around that insulation, and you just squeeze it and it ratchets the the black, green, or white insulation right off the wire. We're going to try and cut just about a ½ inch off of this. By the way, when you're using these strippers, you don't want to try and cut too much insulation off all at once. Usually a ½ inch or so. That's not too bad. It'll do that pretty easily. Okay, I've kind of gone around there just chewing. Let's see what happens when I try pulling on that. That's not quite doing it, but I've been using the 10 gauge hole. Let's move this up here to 12 gauge. And kind of turn that around and then give her a good pull. And it came off. But again, you know, I started with the 10 gauge grip. I didn't want to start with 12 gauge because this insulation's kind of tough. You saw how hard I had to pull that. And I did not want to take a chance on cutting some of these wires. Okay, I'm going to do the other two. Let me get some of this junk out of the way. You might be able to see this better. So we've got about a ½ inch of bare wire showing on each of these. And the butt connector is, you can see that that's plenty of wire to go into the actual metal connector inside this shrink wrap type butt connector, and still have plenty of the actual insulation to cover the wire down about an inch. So we'll go ahead and, just to make it easier to see, we can go ahead and put this on. Some people might prefer to connect, let's say, the green wire to the green wire, get it all crimped up first. But I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put all 3 butt connectors onto the extension cord, and then I'll go ahead and connect my repair cord to this. Recognize this? It's not a snake. This is just a section of garden hose. This is the kind of cheap hose you'd buy at Walmart or Family Dollar, someplace like that. It's bigger than ½ inch, but it's not 3/4, so it's probably something like 5/8 of an inch. But the inside, as you can see, the diameter of that is big enough to accept a fully insulated 12 or 10 gauge extension cord. So we're going to cut off a section of that, you know, maybe 6 inches. That'll give us plenty of room. We'll just go ahead and cut that with a knife or our cutters. I've got a couple of hose clamps, and we'll go ahead and cut this little section. This is what we're going to use sort of as a bandage over our repair. So we want to go ahead and get this on before we connect the butt connectors. We have our garden hose. This sleeve is going to go over our repair. We have that pushed down far enough to where it's not going to be in our way. Got the garden hose on there and a couple of hose clamps. And now we can go ahead and proceed with the repair of connecting these butt plugs. You want to twist this wire up so you don't have any loose strands. Take the butt plug Carefully slip it over there. And these particular plugs, you know, are just plastic that you can see through. And I'm pushing it on there far enough to where there's no copper wire showing. All the copper wire is inside the crimping section. Put them in on my crimper and give her a good push. I have to put some weight on it. I got a good crimp. Now you may have to, I guess you could use a pair of regular pliers to squeeze that on there, but having a set of crimpers really makes it easier. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and attach butt plugs to these other two wires. Here's our brand new extension cord. It's a 6-footer. That's a little bit of overkill. I wanted a 3-foot, but when I went to order it from Amazon, they were sold out of the 2-for-1 3-footers. So I went ahead and ordered a 6-footer. And that'll be okay. In fact, it may even be better. You know, a lot of times people, I'm not trying to sound sexist or whatever, but, you know, kids and wives don't work with this stuff very much. And so when they go to unplug something, instead of holding on to the plug itself to bring it out of a tight receptacle, they may be tempted to grab hold of the wire like that and pull. So with this 3-foot of, you know, 6-foot divided into 2 is 3 foot each. That means our splice is going to be a long way from wherever this plugs in, and it's very unlikely a kid or somebody not skilled in electricity might go all the way back 3 feet to pull that plug out of the receptacle. You see what I'm saying? It's going to be an extra safety feature, even though it did cost me a little more to get the 6-foot cord. I would probably prefer a 3-foot cord, and that would put the repair 1.5 feet away from your new plug. Okay, this is pretty much going to be what you've just seen. I'm going to cut this cord in half. I'm going to take the insulation off of it, get it down to the inside wires, and connect those to these butt plugs we already got on the old extension cord. I won't bore you with that. I'll come back when we're ready to connect it. Here's something I wanted to mention to you. This extension cord, this new extension cord I bought, is 12 gauge. So in other words, the 3 wires inside of it are going to be the same as the 3 wires in my old extension cord. However, the insulation around it is not nearly as thick or as weathered and hard as that old yellow stuff was. So keep that in mind when you go to cut the insulation off. It's going to cut very easy compared to your old extension cord. You don't want to cut too deep. Well, after doing some research, I found out that this, what I thought was a 12 gauge extension cord is actually 10 gauge, and my new one is 12 gauge, but this is going to work out fine. It's not going to cause me a problem with what I'm using it for. And these butt plugs will accommodate either one, 10 or 12. You can get a pack of 80. I think there's 80 in here. Yeah, 50 pieces. I'm not sure. I think it was like $8. So you can do a lot of repair for less than $10. And you can see how much we left over, you know, an inch, inch and a quarter, inch and a half when we cut our wires. And when you go to put them together, you'll see why you needed that, because if they were any shorter, it would be almost impossible to make these connections. So the way I showed you in this video, it seems to work out just about perfect. Right, we've got our two sections put together, and this is shrink, so we can use a cigarette lighter to apply a little bit of heat to that. You don't want to keep it in one spot too long, because we definitely do not want to damage our insulation on these wires. Okay, myself, I happen to own a heat gun. I'm just going to plug that in and give this a good shot of heat and make sure everything is crimped down watertight. All right, it's going to be loud. Turn down your earphones. This heat gun is making those butt connectors close right up. Go all the way around, make sure you get good closure on all sides. I don't know how hot this gun is right now, but I can hold my hand on it for about 4 or 5 seconds before it gets really uncomfortable. Oh yeah, this is looking so good. We've got a nice tight connection there, waterproof connection, but we're going to wrap all that repairs with some black electrical tape. I'm going to start my wrap up here on the old part of the extension cord, and then just kind of do a candy cane type wrap all the way across this until I get up to the new stuff. And then I want to go across the new insulation a little ways too. That'll help prevent these things being pulled apart sometime. So I'll probably do this 2 or 3 times, and then we'll work on this garden hose sleeve. That looks good. You know, if I was doing a repair for an indoor cord, like in a garage or something, I might even just leave it like that. That's probably going to be fine. But because I use this outdoors, and every week when I cut my grass, I have to take these cords apart so I can get my lawnmower out there. So it's going to get a lot of wear and tear. I'm going to go ahead and slide the garden hose on up. Looks like I might have to put the heat gun on here to get it over this little knot where the butt connectors are. Stand by. We'll put a little bit of heat on here. I could have staggered the butt connectors where they were not all knuckling right next to each other, but that would have just complicated things. I think this is going to work fine. Oh yeah, there we go. If you have this problem, then maybe you got an old hose out there that's a little better than this tiny Walmart, Dollar General hose. There we go, that's good. Okay, now I had to use my heat gun to apply a little bit of heat to this small section of garden hose to get it over the knuckles of the butt connectors. But now everything's where it needs to be, and we'll connect the hose clamps to each end of this garden hose, and the repair should be done. All right, that came out very nice. These hose clamps were a little bigger than I really needed, so I've got a tab sticking out, which could catch on something or maybe cut somebody if they were barefooted and running around. I'm going to take some black tape and wrap around these hose clamps and call that finito. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side of the extension cord. This was the receptacle side. I'll be putting a plug on the other side. It doesn't really matter which one you work on as long as you connect the light colored wires. The white goes to white, green goes to green, and black goes to black. All right, I hope this was helpful to you. I know I'm going to trust this a lot more than those crazy plugs that I've tried to replace in the past. Okay, I appreciate you watching.